بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين اللهم بارك لنا فيما رزقتنا يا رب وقنا عذاب النار اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا من فضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. Alhamdulillah wa shukrillah. We talked a bit in the third session. Inshallah ta'ala we'll finish tonight on fitness and Suluk. We talked about the fitness of the human memory. And I mentioned two sunnahs, and it struck me after I finished that I only mentioned one of them. One of the sunnahs is the qaylula, or sleeping, catching up during the day, something that the Prophet did, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The second, which we omitted to mention at the end of the last, that helps the memory, the two sunnahs. There's actually two sunnahs and one fard that helps with the memory. The second of the sunnahs is fasting. And we'll talk about that in some more detail, inshallah ta'ala, tonight. The third matter that helps the memory was one that was conveyed to us by Imam al-Shafi'i. شكوت وكيعا لوكيع عن سوء حفظي فأرشدني على ترك المعاصي. He said, I complained to Waqi', my teacher, about when he was a student, about my poor memory. And he directed me to cease committing sins. So that's one of the most important things. Ulul albab, those who have muraqabah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes their minds. Subhanallah. I still have ghibta, or the good envy, inshallah ta'ala, of my mentor, Shaykh Abdul Rahman, and his memory. Subhanallah. Prodigious. So, the fitness, just to mention a few things before we get into and have a story at the end, inshallah, before the questions. The fitness concerns ruh, and the ruh, or soul, the mind, the body, and also genetics, as a part of the body. The suggestions for fitness that we have for ruh is a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for afiyah at the times that it's recommended. Allahumma inni as'aluka al-afiyata fi ad-dunya wal-akhirah. The dua of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he taught Anas ibn Malik and told him to say between the adhan and iqamah, after apprising him that the dua between the adhan and the iqamah is not left unanswered. He says, well, what should we say? He said, say, we ask Allah, oh Allah, we ask you for well-being in this world and the next. And at the Mubarak times, another of the Mubarak times are at the end of the Salat and after the Salat. These are times that are Mubarak for dua, and so we don't omit this. Another of the Mubarak times is in the last third of the night. So we said these are advices, otherwise, as Jalaluddin Rumi mentions, there has to be a thief on the inside to unlock the door for the gang outside, for an inside job. And the thief is your tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the insider is your tawfiq, your irada. And, the gang is the nasiha for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah to make wouldn't go on and on, but our Shaykh made me swear to give nasiha when he gave me the bay'ah. وَنُصْحِي لِكُلِّ Muslim, and to do well by every Muslim. It's part of the bay'ah of the tariqah. So dua for afiyah at the times, and especially gratitude and thanks for your food and your drink and your blessings and your income. This is the things that make barakah in it. And we mentioned tark al-ma'asi, and also of the ruh, the things that bring about fitness and happiness, are the supreme name before going to sleep. Everyone should be saying the supreme name, Allah, 66 times or 100 times or whatever it may be, before, and fall in love with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the wisdom behind it. He who knows Allah cannot help but love Him. And the prayer at its time. The prayer should be at the first of its time to show that you're eagerness and energy are characteristic of those who love Allah. So throw yourself into the prayer and into the dhikr that is in the prayer. أَقِمَ الصَّلَاةِ لِذِكْرِ, at the first of the time, and say the takbirs to help make the dhikr work. Use the words of the salat prolong the takbirs, and the place where you prolong them is in the second unwritten alif of Allah. Allahu Akbar. So that there's no part of the salat that is without dhikr. Yeah. Say the takbirs throughout and prolong them, and the salat on the Prophet ﷺ, know whom you are saying the salat upon. The salat on the Prophet with hudur, as much as you can possibly summon. All of these are means of fitness of the ruh. And another means of afiyah, of good health, is giving sadaqah, and especially giving sadaqah regularly, and especially when you're just starting out in life and you think you're too poor to give sadaqah. The Prophet made a point of mentioning this, lest we come up with an excuse. So all of these are, so giving sadaqah. And generally, what is the best thing for afiyah in this world and the next is to be a Sufi. Give Allah everything. Give Allah everything and live for Him. These are the rules of the Sufis. And another thing, the means for protection and for good health and protection from all sorts of disasters is the wadhifa, if one can read it all the way through. And we mentioned the way of Shaykh Abdul Rahman, a busy man with lots of social connections. Not when I first knew him because of all the terror, state terror, but in the latter part of in the 90s certainly. And what he would do is he would read the wadhifa, and when he interrupted by a phone call, interrupted by giving directions or going this or that place, and he'd pick it up from where he left off and read it. Those ayahs at the end of it that were added by Dhafar al-Madani radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he's the founder of the great Madaniya Shadhaliya Tariqa in Libya, that Sultan Abdul Hamid helped and built a zawiyah for their sheikhs and had the barakah of their sheikhs and attended their hadra, incidentally. I think he had an underground passageway to reach so he attended. The Ottoman sultans, each of them was not just left to be a big shot and a ruler, but they taught their sons a trade. And the trade that he was taught was woodworking. And so Sultan Abdul Hamid actually made some of the lattice work, the lathe work, for the Shadhali Zawiya in Istanbul. It's still standing. It's made out of wood. It's not like a marble public building, but it's a very wood. You can go there and see it. And the sheikhs are buried down the road from it, the Madani sheikhs. These are the ones who put the wadhifa. Dhafar al-Madani is his ijazah from Mawla al-Arabi Daqawi. And why are all of these things why do they help with afiyah? Among the reasons after the tawfiq of Allah is there's a stress-free life of tawakkul. Somebody who realized true tawakkul on Allah doesn't have stress. And stress is the big killer. People wonder which is the magic food to add or which is the magic food to drop. And what they should drop is the way their lifestyle. They're boiling in their juices, watching the small screen all day. It stresses them out. It's their work. It's the big blight. So this can be mentioned for the ruh. As for the mind, what we recommend and can recommend is to think. You have ulul albab. And the person who is intelligent, what does he think about? He thinks about the long term rather than the short term. The whoopee for 2 seconds is somebody with no mind thinks about, but somebody who's intelligent thinks about the long term, and so the vision of eternity and where you're really going and for how long is the way of ulul albab, those clearest of mind, who are mentioned in many places in the Quran. Ulul albab. And so think and de-technify yourself to the extent that it's possible. The technology, everyone tends to, people from the third world especially, no insult intended to anyone, tend to think of them, or the older generation especially, tend to think of everything that has buttons and whirs and clicks and has lights as something that's a wonderful addition to their lives, no matter what it may be. And rather, the presumption with any new technology is that it's flawed, and it probably has some hidden danger in it until it's proven otherwise. And so that it should be used the least of what you can possibly use it, rather than the most. And so the answers to the mind has questions about this and the questions about that. The way that is the most successful is to take the answer from the one who created everything. Take your answers from the Quran for all of the big questions. This is characteristic of those clearest of mind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything. And He's given a detailed explanation of all the big questions. Whoever wants to know everything has only to read the Quran. So the answers to the mind and its wasawas and so forth should come from the Quran. And read it and think what the verses mean. Use that mind. And the mind should also have gratitude for everything and love of the akhirah, as we mentioned. And to know, for example, that inna ma'al usri yusra, verily with hardship there is ease simultaneously. And also of the ease of the mind and the health of the mind is, as we mentioned, suhbah, good suhbah, companionship. Not being alone, being the rugged individual who's off in the weeds by himself. The shaitan is his buddy, his friend, and he gives him all the answers and gives him fatwas for nothing. What a service. But it's pretty difficult to withstand. Few people can withstand it, so you need good suhbah of people that are cool, calm, and collected and understand something about the deen. So of good suhbah is a good marriage. And so if your marriage isn't working, make it work. It's of the utmost importance. And also of the mind, there are a lot of people with wasawas out there, and they feel extremely out of it and depressed and unhappy. And it's as simple as as we mentioned before, it's as simple as taking a pill. There's an epidemic of vitamin D shortage. Nobody goes out in the sun anymore. And some people, native Jordanians, have come to me with severe waswasa. One person thought he was cursed because of a dream he had when he was 10 years old. And so what did he do? He said, go down to the hospital and check your vitamin D levels. Do so. If you haven't already done so, do so and check them out. They should be up to 70. Below 30 and you start getting weird thoughts. And below that, and you can start, seeing crow people coming out of the socket. We'll talk a little bit more about vitamin D, but it enters in, according to Dr. Mansour, our geneticist, it enters into more than 1,200 metabolic processes in the body, and so it's not something like a minor player, and everybody's short on it. Virtually, almost everybody. Okay, the body, the things that we mentioned were to, one thing is to, that helps with the body is to keep, as foods, good foods. And so we mentioned a few things about them just to cast a quick backward glance. Keep your foods simple. Somebody with extravagant taste, well, I've got to have Mandarin Chinese food, and now I've got to have a pepperoni pizza, and the next night I've got to have, and he's angry with his wife because she hasn't been able to invent a new vegetable. All the extravagant international tastes are a recipe for bad health, because all the restaurant stuff is grease-out stuff. And if you just duplicate it at home, you get a grease-out diet that also pounds the brain and pounds the health. So we mentioned of the things that we can recommend without any reservation to drink are water. And the prophetic sunnah, the Prophet ﷺ, he recommended laban, which means milk in the ancient Arabic dialect, but a far cry from the milk that exists on the grocery shelves today. They're quite different. The difference between the milk straight from the animal and the things that have had all the things done to it from the dairy, as it's called. All the diet gurus rail against dairy, and they should. The dairies are terrible, they ruin the milk. But if they got their milk from real animals, they would be singing a different tune. And this is what we firmly believe. So water, we mentioned vegetable juice. Vegetable juice quickens the mind. People who drink vegetable juice 3 times a week have 30% less cases of dementia, Alzheimer's, and other mental problems. It has a great deal to do with mental health. There are hundreds and hundreds of phytochemicals in ordinary vegetables, all of which benefit the body. And so many they don't even have probably names for all of them. And so, and then secondly, good foods are something we can also, fish, deep sea fish that we mentioned, deep sea oily fish from cold waters. And cans are the most easy, transportable. Sardines, herring, salmon, mackerel, these are all, and black cod, which isn't a cod at all, but it's a big black ugly fish that they found that has double the omega-3s of anything else, even king salmon. It's called sable fish also. They named it that to make it seem more presentable to guests. But all of these spend, there's almost no barrier between the fish oils in these and they affect the mind positively and directly and quickly. They go straight to the barrier. And also the omega-3, omega-6 ratio. You can augment it by getting a good cod liver oil, lemon-flavored cod liver oil, something good. Start out with 1 teaspoon a day, go work up to 3 teaspoons a day. And it will have a tremendous positive effect on the health and the whole body. Ideally 5 to 9 servings of vegetables a day. Servings about the size of your fist, or a little bit less. 1 serving of fruit. Fruit juices are not recommended because they're high calorie and they're not that beneficial. They're mostly just sugar drinks writ large. But the fruits themselves are okay. Some bodies genetically are able to handle fructose better than others, and some are not equipped for it. And so, like a piece of fruit would be a good. Fermented foods of all sorts. These are traditional dish. We'll talk about traditional cuisine in a minute, inshallah. And yogurt, cheese, butter, and milk that are from raw produce, not as opposed to pasteurized, organic and pasture-fed. My grandfather, who I've mentioned, lived to be 95 years old. Last couple of years of his life, he says, "I'm going to die this year," and he didn't. But he raised cattle. He had about 300 head of them, and he sold all of his grain-fed beef to the marketplace because everybody liked the marbled beef. It's high omega-6 because of the oil in the grain that was used to feed. The omega-6 oil is in the grain that they feed cattle with, typically. What did he eat? He didn't ever eat it. He would eat the grass-fed cattle, even though they were tougher. It's a tougher cut of meat. It doesn't cook up so tender as the fat-laden ones, but it's a tougher cut of meat. You cook it less long. And he says, I think it's a better meat. And it was, because these have omega-3s in them from the grass that they have. And so all of these, yogurt, cheese, buttermilk, but raw and organic and pasture-fed if you can. Another is organ meats from animals, meaning kidneys and liver, heart, spleen, lungs, sweetbreads, all of these. And the meat, not so much fishes, but the oily fish is better more frequently, but range-fed meats with the bones in them, as we mentioned, or as we didn't mention yet, but will. And cereals and sugars, sucrose and fructose, and starches, like ground flour and so forth, anything with flour. Wheat flour, rye flour, any kind of ground flour, and sucrose, i.e. table sugar, and glucose, shun it. So rukhsa, have it a little bit. The flour, bread, have a little bit of it, but not much, just something for taste. And the sugar should be shunned. And sweets, you should make dates and fruit your preferred sweets, and not these other. So skip the sugar and refined starches, and skip the fast foods. That Atif was telling me about a website that he saw long ago and far away, where somebody had a collection of Big Macs. The reason he started his collection was that he got a Big Mac and he accidentally stuck it in his suit coat pocket. And he found it again 6 weeks later, unchanged. And so he began a Big Mac collection to see. Nas'Allah al-afiyah wa tawfiq. Real food doesn't stay 6 weeks like that. And Nas'Allah, a formaldehyde burger, well, but Nas'Allah. And so skip the fast food, skip the sugary food, skip the starches, except very occasionally, and skip junk foods and international foods, these things where you've got to have a different taste treat, just jaded. Be hungry when you eat and it'll all taste good. And we mentioned also, as we said, a kailula, sleeping in the day if one can manage, even if only a short period of time. And because it changes the physiology, and also it's a stress reducer. And if one is exercising, and one should exercise, a day of rest. One day when you don't do very much. And we mentioned something. We're going to recommend a number of books for different people of different interests, inshallah, for the Ramadan reading. The main book to read in Ramadan is the Quran, obviously. But also one other book we heard last year, we recommended Boys Adrift for parents. And this is if the parents haven't read this book, they should. Because what goes around comes around, by Leonard Sachs, Boys Adrift. And so that was what we recommended last year. This year, I have a couple ones that are pretty good. One of them that is easy reading, it's kind of an internet book, grammatical inaccuracies and spelling mistakes. But the idea is basically correct. It's called Eat, Stop, Eat by Brad Pilon, Pilon. And what he's discovered is a revolutionary new approach to health and well-being, which consists of fasting twice a week. And so he rebuts all of the myths against fasting, one after another in his book. I haven't seen such a book from a Muslim. But what he comes up with is that if you do two things, and so this is on the recommended list for men, especially those who have weight problems, and women also have weight problems, that to fast, make a fast twice a week, because why? The basic, one of the basic health problem of all of the degenerative diseases, or one of the greatest health problems, is that everybody in America, in North America probably we could say safely, is overfed. The food producers produce about 4,000 calories per day for every man, woman, and child in America, and they've got to sell it. And a person typically needs about 2,000 calories, or a bit less than that even. And so everybody is always slamming the food down. And so what happens when you slam the food down all the time? When you eat food, the body puts out insulin. Because the previous eras of history, prehistory also, used to store the food in the stomach into fat right away to save it up for a rainy day through insulin. Insulin converts it to stored energy. And so they've got insulin circulating in their system all the time. Now our fathers and forefathers didn't have insulin in their system all the time. They weren't continually packing it away. And so now they've got a lot of health problems. And so this person has hit upon a very huge secret, and this is also the prophetic sunnah, is to fast. And he mentions fasting from food entirely for 24 hours. So what does it mean? It means that you have a water sahur twice a week. But here we have to make the intention for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to worship Allah thereby. That you say, oh Allah, even if this doesn't have any effect on my health, I'm going to do this for you. And then carry it out. Give it a try and see. And but also with this, the eat, stop, eat, as he puts it. It's the title of his book. Instead of eat, it's called eat, stop, eat. And but also he says that a person, in order to keep from losing muscle mass, which is important also, has to do weights 3 times a week. And weights, you can have a decent workout in 10 minutes. If you have a set of barbells, find out from a book, 5 basic lifts that handle most of the major muscle groups in the body, and do them for 10 minutes 3 times a week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever it may be. And so read the book, and I think you'll be convinced. He's got a lot of hard science in it that's very excellent. And so body, keep the food simple, and exercise. And people that have chronic diseases, chronic backache, chronic knee pain, chronic this, chronic that, and they've had it for years and years and years, chronic skin problems, whatever it may be, you could probably do better than to read The Mind-Body Prescription by Dr. John Sarno. This is something, it's about psychosomatic, the effect of the mind, the unconscious, on chronic diseases. And he argues convincingly for some things. Of the adab of the body is to eat and drink for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we mentioned, to thank Him and praise Him. And hunger is also important. You have to give the body a break sometime. You can't just shovel down the food, as we mentioned. There has to be a stoppage of insulin in order for the body to get its breath back. And if it doesn't get its breath back, all sorts of problems happen. Like what? Like exactly what we see in North America and in other places where there are affluent people. They're continually eating diseases. And also of the foods that to give a mess, as we read, are the vegetable oils. Zero cholesterol oils, and the things that chips are fried in. Everybody gives their kids a bag of chips to pacify them, so that the kids in England consume something like 1.5 liters of vegetable oil from the chips yearly. This stuff pounds the health. All of these vegetable oils pound the health. The body isn't made to take them. Cheap and inexpensive and economical as they may be. I know. And workouts, we mentioned, the best being the most intensive, and then to rests and recovery in between. Walking and sprinting is better than the endless marathon As one writer observed, he says, if you look at the sprinters at the Olympics, he said they all look healthy and robust. He says you look at the marathon runners and they all look beat and haggard. The first marathon runner in history dropped dead at the end of the race in Greece, Olympics, as you may remember. So it's not the long haul, but rather bursts of energy and recovery in between. There's a more successful way, and it's a more economical way. And Sidi Omari can train you as to how to do it. If you're in the neighborhood here, that's his technique. And so it's one of the very best things. So intense calisthenics followed by recovery. And we mentioned a day off once a week. Also, stop your work at night. Don't be typing the last email as you're sitting on top of the bed at 11 o'clock at night on your laptop. This is madness. Just unplug. And if you don't know how to unplug, well, how am I supposed to get along in life if I don't answer all my emails? Well, read The 4-Hour Workweek by Timothy Ferriss. And he has admirable strategies, although he's not a mu'min by any stretch of the imagination, of cutting down one's email answering. We have mentioned this at a couple of the sohbas. What we wanted to recommend to mothers with children or wives or those who are pregnant who want to become mothers is the book Deep Nutrition by Catherine Shanahan. This has many why your genes need traditional food. And so I thought I might say a few words about this very unique and valuable book, inshallah ta'ala. I had our pediatrician and medical doctor, and Dr. Saqib, read it to kick the tires of the science in it, and he said it was pretty passable. And he gave me a couple of the notes in it. The book stresses the importance of nutritional status before, during, and between pregnancies to have healthy children. I have observed, and some doctors have observed, that the ethnic Muslim peoples have more than their share of birth defects. And I don't know the reasons for this, but I suspect that education might have something to do with it. Also, the epigenetic research of the past 3 years or so, or 5 years, we can say, perhaps more accurately, suggests that the acquired characteristics acquired with effort by parents are passed on genetically to children. And so this is this was common sense in the old days. They accepted this. And so extremely bitter experiences, like someone invading one's country and taking away one's home and throwing one out of where one lived for generations and generations. Wars, the partition between India and Pakistan, for example, huge displacements, have powerful epigenetic effects. It means the switches that turn off and on genetic genes or make them inaccessible to the body happen. They're turned off and on with all sorts of... And so what can we do about it? Oh no. Well, you can switch things back on with good nutrition and with good exercise, but you have to be more conscientious. So this is a reason to... Well, I'd like to see the ladies of the tariqah, and particularly those who are mothers or know mothers or are aiming to become mothers, or wives who cook food for their family, whatever it may be, would benefit a great deal by reading this book called Deep Nutrition, which we're mentioning just a few of the points from here. The key importance of maternal nutritional status before, during, and between pregnancies. Maternal and, to a lesser extent, paternal nutrition may have major implications for their child's health and also for future generations. They found, for example, that somebody with a smoking habit passes on serious genetic problems to their grandchildren. So we have responsibility. Once we know something, we have a responsibility about it. So epigenetics, the switches that turn genes off and on, which are very important. And a general decline in worldwide nutrition gives a plausible, or though not proven, explanation for increase of chronic diseases, and such as asthma and allergies and other things also. So some epigenetic effects are likely irreversible by the time of puberty. Bone structure, the way that the teeth are lined up and so forth, but many others are potentially reversible, meaning that it is never too late to change one's health or the health of one's future children or even one's current children by modeling healthy behaviors. So this is an important point. The book has some objectionable points in it. There are some troublesome and objectionable pictures in the book. A lady wrote it, and so she's concerned about how beautiful the faces of the people are as a measure of health. And so, feminine sort of intellect at work, putting these pictures of all these people, and so cover up the pictures and then go to work on the text is my recommendation. But it explains many difficult to understand things like how cholesterol works and other things in terms that everybody can understand, and what to do and how to cook food, and so that it's of the maximum benefit to one's families. And it emphasizes vitamin D. Vitamin D should be taken both by women and their infants. Both by women and their infants. Married women of childbearing potential, pregnant women and breastfeeding women should all be taking at least 1 to 2,000 international units of vitamin D daily. They should all have a vitamin D level checked, and if low, may even need more daily. The usual thing if your vitamin D is at the rocks and not the pits is to take one of these, get a prescription for the 50,000 international unit capsules, take it for 10 days, and then after that you can take it on the 1st and the 15th of each month, and that's all you need, twice a month, a capsule. Let's see. Standard prenatal vitamins do not have sufficient vitamin D. Breastfed infants should all receive 400 international units of vitamin D, available as infant drops. And Dr. Salka mentioned to me that he saw many children who were breastfeeding, who were nursing, who had seizures these days, simply because they don't have enough vitamin D in their bodies. And these were chiefly, he mentioned, Afro-Americans and ethnic Muslims. And so, Nasrullah al-Afiyah wa tawfiq. And so, to be forewarned is forearmed. Vitamin D is fat soluble, and so it should be preferably taken with a meal that has fat in it. Aside from a variety of effects on mother's health, low vitamin D can cause problems in babies, including the well-established issues of rickets, abnormal bone development, i.e. from lack of vitamin D, low calcium, and seizures, and possibly other effects such as abnormal immunity, asthma, allergies, and eczema. And all of these are seen among the Muslim populations. The only source of vitamin D is for breastfed infants is the mother's milk and sunlight, although most infants have limited sunlight exposure. Therefore, both mother and the baby should take vitamin D. Okay. Also, the general. I won't create any more suspense. There's a few things. There is the diet recommends, the diet that the lady recommends in this book, Deep Nutrition. The book is thoroughly reasonable. It's a real piece of good work, of good science. She recommends that the 4 pillars of world cuisine, that all families, that all world cuisines, the French cuisine, Chinese cuisine, everything cuisine, should have these things if it's to be healthy. One is to cook meat on the bone. The cartilage goes straight to one's cartilage. There's glucosamides in the cartilage, actually, that they're a very profuse compound in the human body, and the cartilaginous, i.e. cartilage between the bones of the human body, needs this. It should supplement for it. So meat on the bones, fermented and sprouted foods, and these are easier to prepare than you might imagine. And as we mentioned, organ meats. These used to be fought over by the ethnic peoples, the peoples, everyone was keen to get it, the different things. the kidneys, liver, and so forth. And number 4, the fourth and last, fresh, unadulterated plant and animal products, and cut sugar and vegetable oils. So we'll leave it at that and leave it to the ladies to read it during Ramadan. Genetics, we've mentioned before, the founder effect about marriages and consanguinity, that if there is a deleterious recessive gene in one's family tree, something that causes some weird disease, and it's a recessive gene, that it will be likely expressed under certain conditions and less likely to be expressed under other conditions. For the founder effect, that was the most likely to the very worst marriage genetics are when a man's mother is the sister of the husband's mother is the sister of the wife's mother. This is the worst genetic combination to express recessive, bad, deleterious, and damaging genes. So the second worst is when the husband's father is the brother of the wife's mother. The third worst is when the husband's mother is sister of the wife's father. And the least bad, and almost no risk, is when the husband's father is the brother of the woman's and the wife's father. So these are some of the things that we mentioned before about the genetics of things. And finally, I promise something that would be likely to change your attitudes, inshallah, for the better. And so we're going to read a passage called, that is about what? Me and my trusty cell phone. If you think that the jury is still out on whether cell phones can be dangerous to your health, then you might want to take time to listen to this. Dr. Devra Davis, author of the book The Secret History of the War on Cancer, has been researching the safety hazards of radiation emanating from your cell phone. Like many people, Dr. Davis just didn't believe the possibility of cell phones being dangerous until she studied it. And now, with the toxicological and epidemiological evidence to back up her claims, epidemiological means to study the cases of diseases that actually break out and see how they're distributed, with what behaviors they're associated with. My cousin Jim fell down on the floor about 3 years ago with a seizure, and 6 months later he was dead. He's 4 years older than myself, actually. And so I became interested in the question. What goes around comes around. And with the evidence to back up her claims, I study of who gets what. She's trying to get the word out that cell phone radiation is not only dangerous, but can be downright lethal. In her lecture, Dr. Davis explains how the biological impact of your cell phone is not related to its power, which is quite weak, but rather to the erratic nature of its signal and its ability to disrupt resonance and interfere with DNA repair. This is now believed to be the most plausible theory for understanding the wide array of health impacts discovered, which include cancer. Can your cell phone cause cancer? One interesting case that can serve as an illustrative warning of the cancer-causing potential of cell phones is that a young woman with no other predisposing risk factors for cancer who came down with multifocal, multi-sited breast cancer. The case was revealed in the May issue of the Environmental Health Trust's newsletter. It turns out the young lady had the curious habit of tucking her cell phone into her bra. Two cancer specialists, Robert Nagurny and John West, concluded there was only one other possibility that might have directly contributed to her breast cancer. We connected the dots, the patient said, and the dots, quite literally the pattern of the cancer and distribution of the cancerous cells, lined up perfectly with the shape of her cell phone. While her doctor can't prove the cell phone caused her cancer, it should serve as a potent warning, not only to other women who might tuck their phones in their bras, but also to those of you who keep your phones in your pants pocket or shirt pocket as well. As a general rule, you'll want to avoid carrying your phone anywhere on your body. Keep in mind that the most dangerous place to be in terms of radiation exposure is within about 6 inches of the emitting antenna. You do not want any part of your body within that proximity. Heading, why carrying your cell phone on your body is a bad idea. Regardless of the areas exposed to the continuous radiation emitted by your cell phone, there is the potential for harm, although certain areas are clearly more vulnerable than others. For example, research published in 2009 showed evidence that wearing a cell phone on your hip may weaken an area of your pelvis, the bone, presumably. Using an X-ray technique used in the diagnosis and monitoring of patients with osteoporosis, researchers measured pelvic bone density in 150 men who regularly carried their cell phones attached to their belts. The men carried their phones for an average of 15 hours each day and used the cell phones for an average of 6 years. Researchers found that the bone mineral density was lowered on the side of the pelvis where mobile phones were carried, raising the possibility that bone density could be adversely affected by the electromagnetic fields emitted by cell phones. It's important to realize that as long as your cell phone is on, it emits radiation intermittently. Why? So the server can triangulate, the satellite server can find out where you are, and so it can keep track of you for the next call, even if you are not actually making a call. So wearing a cell phone on your hip for 15 hours a day is giving that area of your body nearly continuous radiation exposure. Not weak, but it's so erratic that it staggers the ability of the DNA to repair the tissues around it. And so effects arise. Previous studies have found that cell phone radiation can affect men's sperm count and the quality and motility of their sperm, and this may be a far greater issue than its effect on bone density. Men in particular may want to reconsider carrying their cell phones on their belt or in their pocket in close proximity of their reproductive organs. In addition, you have a number of other sensitive organs in that general area, including liver, kidneys, colon, and bladder. Needless to mention prostate, all of which are susceptible to radiation. Recent evidence identifies strong cell phone cancer link. Last year, an Israeli research group reported a sharp increase in the incidence of parotid gland tumors over the last 30 years, with the steepest increase happening after 2001. Your parotid gland is a type of salivary gland, producing saliva, located closest to your cheek, the same area where most people typically hold their cell phones, me and my trusty cell phone. The researchers found a 4-fold increase in parotid gland cancers from 1970 to 2006, while rates of other salivary gland cancers remained stable. That same year, Dr. Sigal Sadetsky, the principal investigator of a 2008 study, testified at the U.S. Senate hearing that cell phones were identified as a contributor to salivary gland tumors. The report states that your risk of getting a parotid tumor on the same side of your head that you use for listening to the mobile phone increases by 34%. It increases by 34% if you're a regular cell phone user and have used a mobile phone for 5 years. 58% if you have had more than about 5,500 calls in your lifetime. And 49% if you have spoken on the phone for more than 266.3 hours during your lifetime. The World Health Organization classifies cell phone radiation as a Class B carcinogen, a cancer causer. Cell phone subscriptions are now estimated at about 5.9 billion globally. That's 87% of the world's population. I think it's safe to say we've already passed the point of no return when it comes to this technology. Return, my advice. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت سيدنا محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وبعث مقاما محمودا الذي وعده. But as cell phone use continues to grow unabated, a growing body of researchers is speaking out against the technology, warning that it may have serious biological side effects that must be acknowledged and remedied. So the advice, obvious, get a landline and call on this. If you have a cell phone, use it when you're traveling, and use it when you have to and can't, when you're out in the car or something else. Then they have some other precautions at the end of the article that inshallah we'll get to in a second. Fortunately, the warnings are slowly but surely beginning to be heard. In 2011, the World Health Organization and International Agency for Research on Cancer issued a report admitting cell phones might indeed cause cancer, classifying radio frequency electromagnetic fields as, quote, possibly carcinogenic to humans. This classification came in response to research showing wireless telephones increase the risk for brain cancer. According to the press release, Dr. Jonathan Samet indicating that the evidence, quote, the evidence while still accumulating is strong enough to support a conclusion in the 2B classification, as carcinogenic. The conclusion means that there could be some risk, and therefore we need to keep close watch on the link between cell phones and cancer. Given the potential consequences for the public health of this classification findings, it is important that additional research be conducted for the long term, into the long-term heavy use of mobile phones. Pending the availability of such information, it is important to take pragmatic measures to reduce exposure, such as hands-free devices or texting. Heading, children are at the greatest risk, including while in utero, when they're being carried by the pregnant mother. Sadly, children and teens are at the greatest risk, both for parotid gland tumors and brain tumors. And if a tumor in your mouth, it can't be an easy line of work. And as their thinner skull bones allow for greater penetration of cell phone radiation, the radiation can enter all the way into their midbrain, where tumors are more deadly. In addition, children's cells reproduce more quickly, so they're more susceptible to aggressive cell growth, i.e. cancer. Children also face a far greater lifetime exposure. According to Professor Leonard Hardell of Sweden, those who began using cell phones heavily as teenagers have 4 or 5 times more brain cancer as young adults. The following image, etc., that we have omitted here, shows the difference in the depth of penetration between adults and young children. The radiation goes right to the center of their heads, their young heads. Pregnant women would also be wise to avoid using cell phones as much as possible. In 2008, researchers analyzed data from nearly 13,000 children and found that exposure to cell phones while in the womb and also during childhood were linked to behavioral difficulties. Using handsets just 2 or 3 times a day during pregnancy was enough to raise the risk of their babies developing hyperactivity and difficulties with conduct, emotions, and relationships by the time they reach school age. And the risk becomes even greater if the children also use the phones themselves before the age of 7. Overall, the study revealed that mothers who use mobile phones were 54% more likely to have children with behavioral problems. Later on, when the children began using the phones themselves, they were A, 80% more likely to suffer from behavioral difficulties, B, 25% more at risk from emotional problems, C, 34% more likely to suffer from difficulties relating to their peers, D, 35% more likely to be hyperactive, E, 49% more prone to problems with conduct. Experts adamantly claim harmful effects that are now provable. Experts in the area of biological effects of electromagnetic frequencies and wireless technologies believe there is virtually no doubt that cell phones and related gadgets are capable of causing not only cancer but contributing to a wide variety of other conditions, from depression and diabetes to heart irregularities and impaired fertility. Researchers have now identified numerous mechanisms of harm which explain how electromagnetic fields impact your cells and damage your DNA. Okay, so, and one such expert, Dr. Martin Blank, PhD, one of the most experienced researchers of the cellular and molecular effects of electromagnetic fields in the U.S., gave an informative speech on the Commonwealth Club of California, the health effects of electromagnetic fields, co-sponsored, and he explained why your DNA with its coil structure is quote, especially vulnerable to electromagnetic fields of all kinds. Okay. So the tips for cell phone safety. It's worth remembering that the telecommunication industry is much larger than the medical industrial complex. They have far more influence than drug companies. They're also mirroring many of the same tactics as the tobacco industry to peddle their wares. This includes attempt to discredit researchers who publish unfavorable cell phone statistics. And so tips. Number one, children should always avoid using cell phones. Barring a life-threatening emergency, children should not use a cell phone or wireless device of any type. 2, reduce your own cell phone use. Turn off your cell phone more often. Reserve it for emergencies or important matters. As long as your cell phone is on, it emits radiation intermittently, even if you're not actually making a call. If you're pregnant, avoid or reduce your cell phone use, and this may be especially important. 3, use a landline at home and at work. Although more people are switching to using cell phones and there's the exclusive phone contact, it is a dangerous trend, and you can choose to opt out of the madness. Skype offers a portable number via your computer that can plug into any Ethernet port while traveling. 4, reduce or eliminate your other wireless devices. You would be wise to cut down on your use of these devices. Just as with cell phones, it is important to ask yourself whether you really need to use them as often as you do. Use your cell phone only where reception is good. The weaker the reception, the more power your phone must use to transmit. And the more power it uses, the more radiation it emits, and the deeper the dangerous radio waves penetrate into your body. Ideally, you should use your phone with full bars and good reception. Avoid carrying your phone on your body, as that merely maximizes any potential exposure. Ideally, put it in your purse or carrying bag. Placing a cell phone in the shirt pocket over the heart is asking for trouble, as is placing it in a man's pocket if he seeks to preserve his fertility. Don't assume one cell phone is safer than another. There's no such thing as a safe cell phone. Particularly true for an industry that promoted SAR ratings, which are virtually useless in measuring the true potential biological danger, as most of the damage is not done by heat transfer, which SAR measures. Keep your cell phone away from your body when it is on. The most dangerous place to be in terms of radiation exposure is within 6 inches of the emitting antenna. You don't want any part of your body within that area. Respect others who are more sensitive. Some people who have become sensitive can feel the effect of other cell phones in the same room, even when it's not being used. Use safer headset technology. Wired headsets will certainly allow you to keep cell phones farther away from your body. However, if a wired headset is not well shielded, and most of them are not, the wire itself acts as an antenna, attracting ambient radio waves and transmitting radiation directly to your brain. Make sure that the wire used to transmit the signal in your brain is shielded. The best kind of headset to use is a combination shielded wire and air tube headset. These operate like a stethoscope, transmitting the information to your head as an actual sound wave. Although there are wires that still must be shielded, there is no wire that goes all the way up to your head with these. So I didn't get to the questions. Inshallah ta'ala, I'll collect the questions and we'll finish, inshallah, next Sunday night with your questions. We'll take questions only on next Sunday night, inshallah ta'ala. And so, inshallah, a word to the wise will suffice someone with intelligence and determination. So, people got along with them without them before they existed, and they can get along with them fairly easily, or diminishing them, inshallah ta'ala, now that they exist. فنسأل الله التوفيق والتيسير والحمد لله رب العالمين. So we'll answer the questions, inshallah, next Sunday to finish up entirely. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Fatiha.